Earthshaker battery shells screamed through the air to land amidst mud and foxholes with ear-splitting concussion and shrieking hot shrapnel. Multi-story pipe organs shouted in belligerent argument, wailing the hymns of the ecclesiarchy to drown out the despair of the broken, the shattered, and the dying. Hunter-killer missiles leapt from their silos with deafening roars and keening whines. Heavy bolters, stubbers, and autocannons spat cutting riposts, scything through any who dared cross the empty lands between. Deep in one bunker amongst dozens, buried in hundreds of meters of contiguous earthworks manned by thousands of men and women, a makeshift Medicaid was oversaturated with bodies, groaning, screaming, pleading. Some even still had a chance at life. There, Sister Rhea Tabitha of the Order Hospitaller sat on a sagging plastwood bench, her hands clad in braces splattered with days-old dried blood firmly over her ears. Rhea's violent sobs threatened to choke her, the din of death all around too much. Too much. Everywhere. In her head, in her ears, in her bones. A scream tried to leap from her throat and she tackled it, wrestled it, bottled it and shoved it back down into a gullet. Her crying, though, the waves of pain escaping her dry, cracked lips, she could not stifle. Trying with all her willpower only produced a coughing hiccup, the wounded animal sounds rebounding dully down the covered hall outside the Medicaid, mocking her weakness. "Sister Tabitha." A hand fell on her shoulder. This time she did scream, but only the cut-short yelp of someone entirely surprised by a friend. Rhea looked up through copious tears. A peaked cap overshadowed eyes and a brocaded carapace breastplate loomed over her.
Commissar.
Rhea choked out.
I'm sorry. This must look awful. I must look awful. I do not shy away from my duty in the Emperor's service.
Hush, child. The towering figure spoke gently. I doubt not your loyalty or your courage. You are still here, are you not? You have done much for the men and women of my regiment, for Desea Secundus, and the Imperium. Rhea nodded, sniffling and trying to wipe the wet from her cheeks. The Commissar continued. We have done well. Better than could be expected. I imagine we are weeks beyond the expiration date put on this world by some flimsblast-pushing Munitorum adept safe in his cubicle back on the throne world. Indeed, our ammunition runs low. Painkillers are at a premium, and the enemy is at the gates of the Hive as we speak. But still we hold. The heretics and the damned will pry this world from our cold, dead, Emperor-blessed hands. And not before Sanguinala. He added the last with a grin showing several missing teeth. Rhea affected a wan smile.
Yes, we thank the Emperor that he provides us with a great celebration on the morrow in his divine providence. You should sleep, Sister Tabitha. I do not know how many hours you have labored, but I do know the Medicaid will make do without your ability for a few more, that you might return with greater fervor. Perhaps I shall, Lord Commissar. I thank you for your counsel. Rhea returned kindly, but her insides railed vehemently against the idea. To be alone in the dark, in the empty sororitas bunks, surrounded by the cacophonous onslaught of noise. No, she would sooner walk across no man's land barefoot in a stitched cloth habit. An explosion rocked the tunnel system somewhere nearby, showering dirt on both their heads and making Rhea jump nervously, as if in punctuation to their conversation and her thoughts. The Commissar left down the tunnel, no doubt to rally more flagging loyal soldiers. Rhea stood from the bench and returned to the infirmary, setting her hands to work knitting flesh and setting bones, with or without anesthesia, before her tears had scarce had time to dry. She worked all through the night. Though there was no sunlight deep in the bunker emplacements of the Militarum, an old analog chrono on the wall ticked the seconds, the minutes, the hours passed until she had no doubts dawn would be soon. Her fingers were stiff from the constant sewing motions. Her legs and buttocks and back burned with the agony of constant stooping over makeshift operating tables. The faces of all those she had saved, all those she hadn't,
and all those she had put back together long enough to go back on the firing step melted together in her head. She felt dizzy. Rhea couldn't stand any longer and knew she'd start making mistakes. Deadly mistakes if she did. She went out the Medicaid door, dropping her surgical braces in the dirt between her new favorite bench. She sat and rested her head against the cool earth of the tunnel around her. Rhea didn't know when she had fallen asleep, but she knew now that she was dreaming. The inky blackness of the nothing world moving in and out of focus like waves of the sea. In her dream, she saw a serpent, there and then not. The serpent coiled on itself, snapping at its own tail. Its tail became many, and then one again. Its head, many heads and then none. The serpent formed an upturned U. No, an omega. It collapsed, forming a circle with its head and tail juxtaposed, yet on the same side. An alpha. The serpent dissolved back into the blackness and Rhea awoke, shaking herself. The dream faded, and her memory of it too. She cared little. Rhea never put much stock in the prophecy of dreams. She ruminated on the dream a little as it turned to smoke in her fingers. When she could follow its wisps no longer, Rhea realized she had had a very long time to think clearly between artillery shell impacts. She blinked in the gloom and looked around. The tunnel was even less well lit than usual. The nearest lit loom she could see was many meters distant. She rubbed her eyes in quiet disbelief, unsure if she was still dreaming or not. She stood, the soft crunch of her shoes in the dirt deafening for the lack of noise. Rhea looked under the bench and her braces were still there. She was uncertain if a dreamscape would replicate such inane detail. She took them up and placed her hand on the infirmary door. The steel was cold to the touch. Odd, since the Medicaid was usually unpleasantly warm from the press of bodies. Rhea pulled open the door and stared into blackness. She recoiled and almost let the door swing shut. Where was everyone? The other Medicaid officers, the soldiers ferrying the wounded, the bodies. Rhea put one foot inside the threshold.
Hello?
She called out tentatively. It echoed dimly off the back walls of the room.
Is anyone in there?
She reiterated.
Yes,
Came a reply back to her. Deep, resonant, edged with the tin of a Vox grill. Rhea screamed and leapt backwards, as if the door handle were a snake that bit her. Pressed against the opposite wall, her panicked hyperventilating the only sound around her. It was a full few minutes before she collected herself. She imagined that right. There was no way an empty room just answered her. Rhea smoothed her bloody apron and tried to be rational.
Only one way to find out the truth of the matter,
she thought. Rhea took 2 strong strides to the door, her third faltering, but she took the handle anyway and opened the door wide.
The shell shock and the warp madness must be getting to me, because I swear someone in here answered me. I definitely imagined that, didn't I?
She asked the void, feeling utterly foolish.
no,
Came the reply again, the same voice, rebounding off of her and into the tunnel she stood in. Rhea flinched, but she didn't let go.
All right. Now that I'm sure I've gone insane, what would you have of me, voice in the darkness?
Rhea asked doubtfully.
come in, Sister Tabitha. Let us speak.
She did not know what rot or madness had taken hold of her, but the compulsion to do as the voice asked was overwhelming. She stepped fully into the empty Medicaid, letting the door sigh closed behind her. Inside, the darkness felt absolute, not crushing, but lapping at the edges. Without the ambient light of the looms, Rhea's eyes began to adjust, and she realized it was not total darkness. A single prayer candle wavered weakly atop a surgical stand off-center of the room. When she unfocused her eyes and saw through the thin halo, Rhea could see the outline of a massive figure. A statue almost. a monolith of rounded plates edged with silver, the flat surfaces reflecting and shifting many different hues, always returning to an aqua blue.
Who are you?
Rhea stuttered out.
I am Alfarius. This is a lie.
The Colossus spoke to her. Rhea gawped, fully open, insensate that this massive thing had in fact spoken to her.
I'm sorry.
She asked again, feeling very much like an imbecile, like Alfarius was a name of someone she very much should have remembered.
It matters not, Sister Tabitha. What matters is that we have brought you a gift.
The giant intoned.
A gift? Well, I suppose it is Sanguinala, but I didn't ask for anything.
Rhea scoffed lightly. There was a low, gentle grating sound, and she realized it was laughing. At her or with her, she didn't know, and didn't want to ask. Though she didn't feel particularly threatened, Rhea got the impression this thing could end her life faster than a ruptured femoral artery. A single loom lamp turned on, facing away from the shrouded figure. In the pool of light was a steel surgical table with a man strapped to it, firmly bound in fact. In his mouth was a gag of gauze. Branded on his face and chest were ugly 8-pointed star scars. He was bloody and bruised, and obviously unconscious, but his chest still rose and fell with slow breaths. Rhea cocked her head.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be ungrateful, but I don't understand what this gift is. I'm certain the Emperor didn't send me a heretic for Sanguinala.
The low grating sound came again.
This is not just any heretic, Sister Tabitha. This is the heretic, the arch-demagogue, the instigator and cattle driver of all the godless rabble in the Desea system.
Rhea fell to her knees. This man, the cause of all the suffering she had seen on Desea Secundus. She reeled. This certainly was a very strange dream that she would be waking up from any moment.
Even now, as we speak, the body rides without its head. The once fanatical hordes turn on each other. The guns of the enemy are silent, and the guns of your allies have nothing to bark at.
The statue stated plainly.
Why me?
Rhea turned to look at the shimmering plates again, straining to see a face in the dark that was not there.
Why give this gift to me, and not to someone that matters? The Militarum commanders, the Lord Governor, else, even the bloody Commissar.
Her voice turning to choked desperation as she began to become overcome with tears.
Because, Sister Tabitha, because what we have brought you is not this man, nor even what he represents, but what his absence will provide for you. Peace, if only temporarily. You, Rhea, must hold on to this peace, keep it deep inside you. Hold it carefully like a gentle flame and never...
The figure passed a gauntleted hand the prayer candle, extinguishing it.
Let it go out.
Rhea was crying openly now, in joy or fear, she knew not which.
Thank you.
She barely managed to hiccup out between sobs. A gentle but cold hand touched her shoulder.
Ave Imperator, sister.
The hand withdrew.
Hydra Dominatus.
Rhea reached out to touch the figure, if only once, to feel like all of this was real, but he slipped through her fingers like so much smoke. The last words she heard from him,
Mary Sanguinala,
echoed around the empty Medicaid facility as Sister Rhea Tabitha pressed her aching head and her tired hands against the cool packed earth and cried hot tears.